We knew it was inevitable. We knew it had to happen. There's no good time to lose a game, and they typically average about one a year. So this is the one for 2021. Are there more? Well, if issues don't get fixed, there may be. Welcome to Buckeyes Live here at the Voice of College Football. My name's Mark Rogers. We got, of course, from the top, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop. Also, a double of Buckeye Scoop with Tony Gerdeman. And, of course, Steve Hellwagon, 247 Sports. Bucknuts. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Doing well.
Did the sun come up on Sunday? Did you guys roll out of bed? Everything was fine?
Yeah, everything seemed good to me. I mean,
Okay.
other than the fact Ohio State was 1-1, yeah, and expected to win that game by 2 touchdowns. But, yeah, otherwise everything was great.
Very good. Very good. Okay, Steve, we're going to start with you. Because we know that the fingers are getting pointed, well, in a few different directions on the field at the quarterback and at the defense, and obviously at the coaching staff in particular. So where do we start with this? Let's go with the defense, because when you ring up 612 yards of total offense, even if you don't get into the end zone quite as many times as you should have, there's obvious talent and production on offense. But on the defensive side, my goodness, Steve, the last 3 drives of the game, if I'm counting them correctly, the Ohio State defense finally showed up. We knew that there was a defense on the field for Ohio State the final 3 drives. The one was kind of a give-up drive by Oregon. They were just trying to move the ball, kill the clock. The 2 previous, I thought, okay, well, the defense has shown up. Maybe they can pull this game out because the offense hasn't been stopped yet. But, of course, ironically, that's when Oregon's pass rush showed up, and C.J. Stroud threw a pick and got they picked up a few penalties and obviously stalled. So the defense, it took until like the 58-minute mark before we saw any hand in Anthony Brown's face or any resistance against the running game. We knew the secondary could be an issue. We knew the linebackers were new. The shock to me and to most people, I think, is this defensive front not getting anything accomplished.
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of it right there. I think that, again, this defense just seems to be completely dysfunctional right now. It was Joe Moorhead was the offensive coordinator for Oregon, had been at Penn State for a few years, and I think he had a pretty good handle, at least on what Ohio State might try and do. And they kept Ohio State off balance for the entire game. And to me, there are just so many problems that I mean, it's kind of hard to get to them all, but you can boil it down to the fact that Oregon ran a running play to the boundary once and had success with it, and then went back to it 2, 3, 4 times after that and scored more touchdowns with the same play. And the overarching issue is at Ohio State, where there's expectations to play for a national championship and to win the Big Ten championship and to be a top 5 team, you can't have a situation where you get out schemed and embarrassed like that in terms of just the X's and O's of football. I mean, this was at a level of incompetence that I don't think I've seen in my over 30 years of watching this. I think Virginia Tech back in 2014 they went bare defense. We've never seen it. You know, we get paid $6 million a year to scheme this out, and we've never seen it. You know, that's, as I said then and continue to say, it's like the old Jack Nicholson line, we're just going to surrender our position in Cuba because we can't do anything about it. Wrong. You're getting paid $6 million a year, figure it out. And the same thing applies to Kerry Combs, getting paid $1.4 million a year as the defensive coordinator. Just throwing your hands up in the air and saying, well, they out-schemed us again for the 4th time with the same play is not acceptable. And not at Ohio State, not when they're charging $160 a ticket. And, you know, and you supposedly have the second best collection of talent in the country behind only Alabama, who's recruited better than you the last 5 years. None of these explanations hold any kind of water. They're just 100% not acceptable. So Ohio State's fan base has come out anti-Kerry Combs here for the last 3 days, and rightfully so. Ryan Day did not give him a vote of confidence in any way, shape, or form on Monday, even to the fact of saying there could be somebody else, calling the defense on Saturday. Wouldn't commit that it would be Kerry Combs. So, we can talk X's and O's and all this that you want, but, either he has a scheme that they can't execute or they have a scheme that makes no sense. Take your pick. Or that they did not execute just because they're young, inexperienced, can't get off blocks, etc. God only knows what it is. We've seen every poster under the sun on all of our message boards has rewatched the game and posted their game film analysis and shared what happened and what went wrong. And let's just say everything went wrong. I don't know, but that's kind of my 10 mile up in the air viewpoint that none of this can happen at Ohio State. Not acceptable.
Yeah, I was told if I didn't have anything nice to say, not to say anything at all. So I'm tempted just to pass this on to Tony because I don't have much that I can say about the defense that's very positive at this point. I mean, Denzel Burke has been a pleasant surprise. And, they got Cameron Brown back. And tickets are not $160 this week for Tulsa. Beyond that, I'm kind of at a loss to have much to say there. It's a mess. I mean, it's a mess. Certainly, I can go back in all my years of watching Ohio State and say that I've not seen this type of situation. I was working on writing Tail of the Tape for Buckeye Scoop, and I found myself getting very frustrated and saying the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, just deep rotations, no pass rush. We haven't even mentioned the words Josh Proctor at this point of who's going to step into that role. So even if they do, even if they do find a situation of where they fix maybe just the play calling, I mean, they still have some personnel issues to address. They need to find the right piece to put in that one high safety spot. They need to sit there and stop playing 39 linebackers. And, beyond that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? I don't know what else to say at that point. I'll just throw it to Tony because I'm a little flustered on this one.
And the Josh Proctor thing is interesting as well because it's a huge thing that he's out for the season. And we don't really talk about it because right now it's like your house is on fire and things are starting to flood in your neighborhood. But right now you don't have time to worry about the flood. You've got to put out the fire. And the free safety situation is the flood at this point. The rest of the defense is the fire. And, Day was frustrated by the defensive line, frustrated when he was asked, why are you playing so many linebackers? And his answer was basically, if guys are playing better, we wouldn't be substituting them. And it's like they're still looking for their best players, and none of the linebackers are playing well enough at this point to earn more playing time. I think maybe Kayvon Pope has earned some more playing time based on his performance on third downs and passing downs. But there's no consistency. And, of course, then you go to, well, you got to stay in there for a while and get some consistency. And there's some truth to that. Is it a chicken or the egg? Like, you've got to be good enough to get more playing time, but you have to get more playing time in order to be consistent, to be good enough. And so there's so many problems. And this is right now the second worst defense in the Big Ten with more talent than anybody else by far, by, almost double. So there's no reason for it. There's no good excuse for it. It's just this defense is coordinated poorly. It's been coached poorly. Rewatching the game, you see the linebackers, they find blockers like that's their job, like they're metal detectors or magnets searching for metal, and they find it. You look at the Oregon linebackers, they were clean, and they were able to make plays at the line of scrimmage. That starts up front as well, but also if linebackers are in the correct spots, they are still should be able to clean up some stuff. And you lose Josh Proctor, Bryson Shaw does not have a good game at free safety. So you've got to move some stuff there. And you're moving all of this stuff around and you're hoping to find fixes. But, even duct taping stuff right now should have this as one of the Big Ten's best defenses because you've got the talent. And it shouldn't be this difficult. It shouldn't be this hard to play defense. And you've got enough guys that have been doing it long enough. And there's a ton of inexperience at linebacker, so I kind of understand that. But they're still not being put in good positions to succeed. And The scheme hasn't helped. The coaching hasn't helped. The players haven't helped the scheme and the coaching. So it's like everybody shares responsibility in this. But ultimately, as Kerry Combs said after the game, it's his responsibility. His response to the criticism is it's his responsibility. It may not be his responsibility any longer, though. And I would expect maybe I'm expecting somebody else to be calling the plays, whether Day admits that on Saturday or when we talk to him tomorrow, or if we talk to him today, which I don't think we will. I think it's going to be somebody else calling the plays on defense on Saturday, and my bet right now would be Matt Barnes.
So, Tony, you in particular, a number of times during the offseason outlined Proctor's importance. And he's certainly not the best player on this team, but he's probably not in a top 10 list. But in terms of importance, what are they going to do? We saw, as you mentioned, Shaw's inability on a number of plays, that 76-yard touchdown run. It seems as though anytime a coaching staff is faced with injury substitutions, they do one of two things. Either the next man up is the guy, okay, he's the best replacement, or we got to move a bunch of guys around and then find the best backup over here, and we can elevate him over there and move other people to other positions. So how do you think that's going to shake out?
Well, and it's funny. I think Ryan Day was asked about it on like Monday. He called into like his weekly radio spot, and people throw out names like Lathan Ransom or this guy. And then yesterday, I think it was Dave Biddle threw out a couple of names like Ryan Watts and some others. And Ryan Day's like, yeah, we're going to look at all of it. What I'm expecting is like, I think an easier fix would just Lathan Ransom moves from cover safety to free safety. You put somebody else at cover safety. Like Lathan Ransom was brought to Ohio State to play that free safety spot. If it's not him, it's either Bryson Shaw or Marcus Hooker coming into this week. And both of those guys we've seen. Bryson Shaw graded out a champion in the first week. He played well. This past week, he didn't. And we've seen what Marcus Hooker is capable of in that spot. We've seen Marcus Williamson as well in that spot last year. Those guys didn't play all that well. So I'm wondering if there's been enough time this week to give that role to Lathan Ransom, and then enough time to give give Lathan Ransom's old role to somebody else, or if that's not something they can really do right now. And that free safety spot is huge. You see what happens when they don't clean up the mess. It goes for long runs. We saw that in 2018 when Jordan Fuller was playing that slot safety position for a little bit. And, you look at what happened against Maryland and stuff like that. And then you look what happened when Jordan Fuller played in 2019 at that deep safety, and that was one of the best defenses in the nation. They lose him last year, and everything goes to heck. And it's still there now. And so it's a huge position. And the recruiting hasn't been all that good once Kerry Combs left, and he came back, and recruiting has gotten better. But those are some young guys that they're going to be leaning on, second-year guys, and at me, I would probably put Lathan Ransom there, but I don't know if that's what they're going to do.
It did look like the Maryland game from a rushing standpoint in terms of not even seeing anybody on the screen other than a opposing running back. Steve, maybe I put too much on this defensive line. They've got 3 5-star. The entire Big Ten almost doesn't have as many 5-stars in the conference as the Ohio State defensive line does. And I just thought this group could be devastating. They can just roll their helmets out and they're going to be good, but I guess that's not necessarily the case. And maybe it's too much to ask because JTT just stepped on campus a month ago, and even Jack Sawyer's just a freshman.
Yeah, you make a very good point there. You would think that the defensive line would play at a little bit higher level. I mean, Haskell Garrett was a preseason All-American. Zach Harrison supposed to be leave after this season to go to the NFL. Tyreek Smith, a senior, playing to get to the NFL. The other defensive tackle spot's been kind of a revolving door with Antoine Jackson and Teron Vincent and different guys. So to my way of thinking, the defensive line is kind of where a lot of the problems begin. they're not getting enough accomplished up front with that defensive line. And I think that they're getting no production. In this game, they had 0 sacks and 1 tackle for loss out of 83 plays by Oregon. I mean, that is as pitiful as it gets. Nobody's making a play. They didn't get any turnovers. They didn't make any negative plays. So the defense really accomplishes nothing if it can't do either of those things, and just kind of forestalls eventually. If you can't get pressure on the quarterback, he's going to pick you apart. And they made this guy from Oregon, who's just kind of a middle-of-the-road pedestrian guy, although somewhat of a veteran guy with 30 starts now at the college level, they made him look like John Elway. So I don't know. They got some deep-seated issues, and guys aren't playing up to the recruiting ranking that they had, and the scheme, the personnel, too many people that are just seem to me be playing out of position and just aren't getting the production that they need to get out of these guys. They have got to get back to some type of a scheme that the players that they have can execute, and they got to get more production out of the defensive line. They got to find a way, whether it's more stunts, more blitzes, whatever it could be, to get more pressure on the opposing quarterback, better run fits, to not allow some of the running plays, and to set the edge. I mean, when Oregon, go back and watch the 3 touchdown runs to the boundary, they have a pulling guard on each play, and he's looking for somebody to hit. There's nobody out there to even hit. That's how bad Ohio State's defense was mismanaged on those plays, that they're taking each other out of the play, and it's just an ugly mess out there. So, but it starts up front. The guys that are getting paid the most money, and I just use that in jest, if it was an NFL team, most of the salary cap on that defense would be up front, because those guys had the experience coming in. They're not producing, and I think that's the beginning of the problem.
Yeah, once again, I think you guys are trying to make me say something bad here, and I'm trying to be good. I'm trying to live the golden rule and all of that good stuff, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm Joe rule follower, and I don't like to say bad things, but yeah, the defensive line has been a pretty ugly operation so far. No pass rush. I mean, I understand teams try to speed up against Ohio State, get the ball out of their quarterback's hands, but even on the plays that are taking longer than 1.7 seconds to get out of the quarterback's hands, nobody's close. I mean, maybe against Minnesota, there were some instances where guys were almost getting home. Well, against Oregon, nobody was getting close to getting home. I mean, he could have read a book there. I mean, it was bad. But at this point, do you have any faith with the way that the defense is being called, that if they sat there and send 6, that they're just not going to throw right where the blitzers are coming from? Because Ohio State's defense is wholly way too predictable. People know what's coming. And this isn't a secret. Everybody knows what's coming. And I go back to the old Simpsons episode where Bart and Lisa play rock, scissors, papers, and Bart's like, good old rock. Nothing beats rock. And that's what Ohio State's been doing. And hopefully with some sort of structural change or whatever, maybe they'll throw a paper or scissors in there occasionally, because rock ain't doing it.
Kevin, next week, I'll say real quickly, we're going to do an hour on the wide receivers, so you can just talk good things, and then maybe the next week after that, we'll do a review of 2014. So those are our next 2 shows, so Kevin can talk. Tony.
Yeah, I'll throw in another Simpsons analogy here. When Ned Flanders was a kid and he was out of control and he was just a rambunctious kid, and his beatnik parents took him to a doctor, and they would never discipline him or whatever. And I think it was Ned's mom that said, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas. And that's a lot of what the Ohio State defense has been the last year. You look at these last 4 games from last year to this year. It's the last time they've given up 400 yards of total offense each time. The last time they did that in 4 straight games were the last 4 games of Greg Schiano's tenure at Ohio State in 2018. Ryan Day did not keep him around after those 4 games. And the performance at the end was one of those reasons why. And he's got that same performance going on now, except it's even worse The points are higher, the yardage is higher, so something has to be done. The defensive line, I was rewatching the game the other day, yesterday, I think, and I think they were so concerned about Anthony Brown breaking contain. I saw JT Tuimoloau rushing the passer at one point, and then halfway through, he just stops and backs off while Anthony Brown still has the ball. He rushes and then he plays contain. And then Steve talked about the pulling guards, not even the pulling guards. Just the guys, the guards blocking on those runs to the left. Like there was nobody there for them to block. The guards could have carried the ball in. And when you don't even have somebody there to occupy the blocker, like you have been so out schemed that it's almost a hat tip from Moorhead to say, I'm gonna put a blocker out there. I don't even need one, but I'll do it so it's not disrespectful. I'll make it look like we aren't totally non-confused by what you're throwing out there. So I'll throw a blocker out there, make it look like that you could tackle it, knowing that we don't even need a blocker out there because we've got them so outnumbered and so out leveraged that it doesn't even matter. And as a head coach, Ryan Day is watching this, and he said he's going to be much more involved defensively now, which also annoys him because it takes him away from the offense and the special teams. Urban Meyer had to do this a couple times in his tenure at Ohio State when he had to get more involved in the defense, and you saw some upticks there. But it's going to be interesting to watch because at this point, these next 3-4 games or whatever, what is success? Now, we could probably spend the rest of the show on that. Like the defense obviously needs to look better, but what does it mean?
Yeah, maybe Don Brown's looking for employment again. David Whalen, Kevin, Steve, Tony, we hear about read and react, and this is basically what Tony gave us a classic example of in regards to leverage hit, yet it appeared more like a strange fest, stooge fest with linebackers out of position and practically no defensive line rush. Any other comments in that vein? But again, Tony kind of outlined that just now.
Kevin?
I mean, we want to sit there and keep the rating of this show as kid friendly as possible, so I'm going to take a pass.
We do.
But I mean, I agree with everything you said. I mean, when we've said that, I don't, we can continue to harp on it, but just the leverage is a huge thing. The defense is designed not to give up big plays. And so when it does the exact opposite of that, things are entirely wrong. And the scheme is a good one, but you have to have the players, you have to have the coaching. And remember, like the reason the scheme is the way it is because Ryan Day doesn't like playing against it. Like he is an offensive guy. What defense do I hate the most? That's the one I want here. Urban Meyer said the same thing. Like he hates playing against Michigan State's quarters. So he went and got a quarters defense. That's what these guys do. But you also have to have the guys that can coach it and the guys who can play it. 2014, they brought in Chris Ash, who was a quarters coach, and they weren't good at it initially. I mean, we saw them lose, but they got better at it as the season went on. By the end of the season, they were very good. So there's still time for this defense, but it's clear that under the leadership that they have right now, it's never going to get better, and certainly not good enough to be wherever they want to be.
It only makes sense that when you have superior athletes, that if you're giving up big plays, then you're also making big plays, that you have designed a defense that, okay, you're going to get gashed from time to time, but especially when you get superior athletes, but you're also gashing them and creating turnovers, havoc plays. It just doesn't all add up at all. David Greenshield's looking for the 3 best linebackers on the roster. Who's got that answer?
I'd say Taraja Mitchell, Cody Simon, until he proves otherwise. To me, seems like he's pretty good, although people were complaining about him out of the game on Saturday. And, Pali Nateote, maybe. I mean, that leaves Pope, and although Pope got in there and played pretty well, I think at times. Do we consider Ronnie Hickman a linebacker? He's playing the third linebacker spot quite a bit, unless you call it a 4-2-5. I don't know. So I don't know. I'm open to suggestion. I think that's part of the problem is that, they keep playing so many guys, hoping that eventually they'll stumble across one or two guys who make plays or a group of guys who play great defensively together, and they still haven't found that yet. And it's kind of like the old adage, if you feel like you got to play two quarterbacks, you don't have one quarterback. So I think we're finding that that's the case in the back seven at a lot of these positions. I think Denzel Burke is locked in at corner. I think Cam Brown's going to play a lot at corner. Seven Banks, if he's healthy and can play well, he would be playing. I think there's some question whether he's able to play right now, so or how well he's going to play right now. So you lose Proctor, so now safety's a complete question mark. I don't know. You got more question marks than you've got certainties on defense. I think that's the overarching problem among many.
The optimistic Ohio State fans are not looking at the reality of the situation right now, but hearkening back to 2014, of course. And it all worked out well after a very disheartening loss to Virginia Tech by 2 touchdowns, in which JT Barrett in what could have been a drive to tie the game through a pick six that ended the whole thing. It's just me, Tim 79. Yeah, just win out, run the table, beat Iowa 59-0.
Well,
there it is.
The Big Ten is not a very good league. So, I mean, Ohio State can't play with the level of defense it has right now. But what percentage improvement does Ohio State have to make based on the offense that it has to win this conference? 20%? 25%? I mean, everybody's going to say 400%, 10,000%. I mean, I get it, but I really, I don't think, and okay, say what you will, I'm being a homer on this or whatever. I don't think the league is all that good. And Ohio State doesn't play Iowa or Wisconsin in the regular season and wouldn't have to face one or the other until the, Big Ten championship game, provided Ohio State would make it that far. We don't know what's going to happen. It's a long season. A lot can happen. Maybe these changes, maybe Matt Barnes calls the defense. Maybe, they make some other adjustments. Maybe, they do get Taraja and Cody Simon out there. They get a healthy Court Williams. A lot of things are there. But, I don't think it's out of the realm of impossibility that Ohio State, over these next 4 games that are not proving to be world beaters. Let's remember, Oregon, despite being a 14-point dog, or 14.5, was still a top 15 team nationally. Tulsa, Akron, Maryland, and Rutgers are not a top 15 team. Most of them aren't top 50. So Ohio State's going to have a month plus an open week to be able to try and sort some things out. Now, do I think Ohio State's going to finish the season 11-1? We don't see some wholesale changes on defense? No. But, we certainly were ready to write off the 14 season at that point after the Virginia Tech loss. Everybody was, the Big Ten's college football playoff hopes were declared dead, dead on the table at that point. So, let's let it ride and see what happens. But, I like this a little bit more of a positive, hopeful topic than talking about just the dregs of where the defense is at right now.
Kevin, I'll give you real quick. I'll give you a little story from my own personal experience at ESPN. The day after the Virginia Tech game, that being the first year of the college football playoff, of course, and all hands on deck at ESPN, I actually went to my boss the next day and said, I need off the college football playoff semifinal day. I need that. And he said, what do you need it off? You're an Ohio State fan. I said, I'm laying down a gauntlet of faith here. I need that night off. So I saw it way back at rank number 22 in the country.
Exactly. And the thing is, you don't need the best defense in the nation to win a national title. You need one of the best offenses and a good enough defense. You're going to have to score 40 points to win a national title. So that means holding somebody else to 35 or 41. And Ohio State should have that capability. They should have that ability on defense to hold somebody to just 6 touchdowns. That's all. Just 5 or 6 touchdowns and score 6 or 7, which they should be able to. And so, yeah, I'm not ready to write them off either, because I still laugh at the people who did it in 2014 when the tweets went out like the Big Ten is done after week 2. The Big Ten is out of the playoff picture, and that came back to haunt a lot of people. So I'm certainly not going to write the Buckeyes off right now, especially when, you know what, if Iowa continues to run the table, they're going to be a top 5 team. If Ohio State meets them in the Big Ten championship game, and they won't need to beat them 59-0, they can beat them 9-5, and they're going to get some benefit of that. But also, they're going to need Oregon to maybe look bad at some point this season in a game. I think they can pass Oregon with one loss, but it's going to have to be a bad loss.
They're not going to get the tiebreaker. Oregon missing Kayvon Thibodeau, Justin Flo, and everybody else, going to Ohio State, winning a game that was a one-score game but had the look of more than one score. You don't think that's an automatic tiebreaker for Oregon?
I think it depends on the loss. We saw Ohio State have a bad loss in 2018 that cost them. If it's a 49-0 to Stanford or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, you look
now this will blow up the
Oregon
system.
State in a bad game. You see it,
but it's head to head.
They don't. The committee chooses to use what they want to use, and they'll put the team they want in there.
This is true.
And if they prefer Ohio State over Oregon, then, well, that was a long time ago, and Oregon had a bad loss. Ohio State's best loss was the number 12 team in the nation at that time. So,
and momentum, and if Oregon loses in week 7 or week 8, and Ohio State lost in week 2, and you look at where the rankings are set up, and again, in Grapevine, they're just going to do whatever the hell they want to do anyway. So, I mean, we can sit there and look at all these metrics that should make sense, but it really doesn't matter. And don't think for a second that the 4-letter network isn't going to get in and say, well, Ohio State turns on TVs and a Pac-12 team does not. I mean, Ohio State's going to have that tiebreaker every single time.
Mark, we're on these calls every week with the College Football Playoff Committee after week 8 or whatever, and they change their logic within the call, within the week, depending on the team. They double back. They contradict themselves all the time. So it's whatever they want, as opposed within reason. They're not going to put in a 2-loss team over an undefeated team. But if everybody's in a bowl of chili, they're going to pick out which ones they want, and they're going to leave everybody else home.
Steve, you've always got something to say about this subject.
Yeah, I think if they both have one loss, I think Oregon would get the nod. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't. But there's so much football to be played. And I mean, my assumption today, if you said pick out who's going to be in the playoff, and let's assume Alabama beats Florida this week, which is kind of the first domino going forward. That's like the next big game on the schedule. Let's just assume they go into the swamp and they beat them, which they very well, maybe they won't. I don't know. But let's just assume Georgia wins the East. The Alabama-Georgia winner from the SEC championship would be in. The Alabama-Georgia loser with one loss would probably be in. Oklahoma, if they're undefeated, is in. Now, that's a big if. Oklahoma with one loss, probably still in, as long as they win the Big 12 championship game. And from there, it's kind of murky. It could be the ACC champion, which we figure will be a one-loss Clemson team. It could be the Big Ten champion, which could be an unbeaten Iowa, or one-loss Ohio State team, or a unbeaten or one-loss Penn State team.
Or Michigan.
No, it's definitely not going to be Michigan. And then or it could be an undefeated or one-loss Oregon out of the Pac-12. I mean, I don't know. Maybe UCLA sneaks in, wins that league somehow. But you follow what I'm saying. There's just so many scenarios and so much football out there that need to be played. But Alabama and Georgia, to me, have put themselves on a pedestal so far after 2 weeks to say, yeah, I know the genuine article when I see it. If Georgia could just score a few more points, I'd like them a little better. I guess Alabama has put themselves way out in front of everybody just with what they did against Miami. But, are they going to do that? Going to play that type of football week in and week out throughout the SEC? We're going to find that out beginning this week against Florida, which, we'll see if they can go on the road to the Swamp, a place where they haven't played in, I think it's 10 years, because of great SEC scheduling. We'll see how they handle it. But is Ohio State out of the playoff hunt? No, not by any means. But as Kevin said, I need to see a ton of improvement, or they're not even going to win the Big Ten. So, you start losing games in your own division, to Penn State, to Michigan, to Indiana potentially. And I think all three of those games are now on the line, so to speak. Could go either way based off what I saw this past week. You lose a game in your division, you open yourself up to not win your division. So they doinked one off to Iowa, doinked one off to Purdue, but then they ran the table the rest of the way in the Big Ten. You win the division because you got the tiebreaker over everybody. You beat them head to head, but you open yourself up. And again, if something like that were to happen, you'd have 2 losses and the playoffs completely out of the realm, even if you end up 11-2. So to me, playoffs, Jim Mora. I mean, they got bigger issues than playoffs. It's solve the problem on defense, or you're not going to win out.
That they do. Yakov, along those lines, some are meant to excel only as positional coaches.
100%.
Hi, Sue. What do you guys think?
And along those lines,
Yep.
In Kerry Combs' benefit, when he left Ohio State, the recruiting in the secondary kind of went with him. And when they lost Bill Davis, not that he was a great linebacker coach or anything, the recruiting in the linebacker group wasn't very good in his stead. So now it's all coming home to roost. You don't have any good young defensive backs in the pipeline other than the guys Kerry Combs brought in this past year, like Denzel Burke and J.K. Johnson, who was a national top 50 guy. And from the linebackers, you don't have any veterans that are playmakers, that are difference makers, because Bill Davis didn't recruit anybody. So the best 2 linebackers connected to Ohio State are high school seniors right now. The Powers kid at Marysville and C.J. Hicks down at Kettering Alter. Those are the 2 best linebackers in the Ohio State program, and they're high school seniors. So that's a distinct issue. That's a problem. And to not have anybody in the secondary, with Josh Proctor out now, he was a national top 50 guy, I believe, coming out of Oklahoma. That's a major hit. You don't have, Malik Hooker is not walking through that door. Jeffrey Okuda is not walking through that door, to use the old Rick Pitino line when he was coaching the moribund Boston Celtics there post, Bird, McHale, Parrish, etc. Those mainstay guys that are the best in the league are not walking through that door. So you're going to have to make do with what you got. And so it is a talent issue in one regard. To my way of thinking, the recruiting in those 2 areas has really suffered the last 3 to 5 years. And I looked at it since Ryan Day took over, and let's say the 2019 class was his first true class. They've signed 17 national top 100 guys on offense and only 8 or 9 on defense. Now, I think if you looked at those same rankings, you'd probably find, I didn't count them up, that most years 60% of the top 100 guys are probably on offense, just because everybody loves the quarterbacks, wide receivers, etc., all big-time offensive linemen. So maybe it skews a little more toward offense. But what Ryan Day, who's an offensive-minded head coach, it's hitting him right between the eyes, is we got to get back to getting top 50 guys on defense too. And to their credit, they did get 2 this past year with JT Tuimalao, who looks like he could help the bottom line this year. Jack Sawyer needs a little bit more lead in his pencil, getting swallowed up by big time. He never played against a 315-pound offensive tackle at Pick North, and he didn't play at Pick North last year. So, he's got 2 issues, knocking the rust off, and at 250 pounds trying to go up against guys he's given up 50, 60 pounds to. He's having a hard time with that. So that's not a knock on him. I think, Joey Bosa wasn't Joey Bosa his first day on the job. It took him 6-8 games to really get it. And, I think that's fair for Jack as well.
Jeffrey Okuda, unfortunately, not walking anywhere these days.
He's not walking
he
through
just
any
ruptured
door.
an Achilles. Sue is saying here, what do you guys think is the real reason that Miller and Banks aren't on the field? Obviously, it's not injuries. Day set as much.
Well, the Seven Banks thing was interesting because he did say Seven Banks has had some injuries, but then he also said injuries won't keep him out of this game. So if he plays, then I guess we just assume all is well. If he doesn't play, then there's some intrigue, even more intrigue there. It was just odd the way the back and forth kept going with Seven Banks, where but then he was asked like, so it was an injury issue, and he said yes, but there's no longer an issue. Harry Miller, there's it's I don't even know how to answer this without talking about something I shouldn't be talking about, but like I don't think there's anything to worry about necessarily there.
Steve Sherrill had asked about Al Washington recruiting linebackers. You kind of touched upon that. I don't know if you can see the question there. Basically, just what he's teaching, what he's recruiting. If you have anything else to add there.
Yeah, I'll just throw back on Harry Miller a second. It seems to me, I mean, I look down there before the game. I don't see him on the field. I don't see him in uniform. It seems to me he may be taking some type of a sabbatical away from football is what it seems to me. And, you know, that's perfectly understandable if that's what it is, and they're protecting his privacy if that's what it is. I was told it is not COVID related. So take this for whatever it's worth. I mean, that's I'm just sharing what I was told. And you hope everything's okay with him. You're not sure. It doesn't sound like Luke Whippler beat him out for the center position. He's not playing as a protest to that or something or the other. Doesn't seem like that's the issue. Luke Whippler has done a decent enough job at center the first two games. So I don't think that them losing this game had anything to do with Luke Whippler at center instead of Harry Miller. Seven Banks is curious because he was in uniform at Minneapolis but did not really go through warm-ups. He was in uniform this past week and did go through some position group warm-ups, but I don't think he was out there for 11 on 11 warm-ups. I could be wrong. And it just seems like, as it was termed, he was there in case of an emergency at Minnesota and didn't play in either game. One of the things that I was told was he missed some time in the preseason due to some nagging injuries. And when he was, quote, healthy and declared okay enough to get out there on the field, he honestly didn't perform very well, which is understandable. If you're not 100% going against the likes of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave 11 on 11, you're going to get, fried, toasted, burnt, however you want to put it. So they decided to go with other guys who they feel maybe gave them a better chance in those two games. So the hope is that he gets back to full health. I thought it was great to see Cameron Brown out there, and boy, did he battle and give it everything he had. He had 3 pass breakups. And you guys watched the same game I did. I don't think they lost that game at all because of the play of the corners, Burke and Brown. To me, I thought those two guys, did they give up a big play that I missed just as I had my head down on my computer? Did you guys see Burke or Brown as a liability in this game?
No, whenever a big play happened through the passing game, there generally wasn't anybody within many, many yards, and it didn't necessarily look like it was a corner snafu. So I didn't really see anything. I've not made it all the way through.
Yeah.
The rewatch of the game, I'm tackling about a quarter at a time because I have to go back and rewatch certain plays.
Yeah, you can only take it in small dollops. I fully understand that.
The run defense, Legend Cavazos had some issues in the run defense because he was the corner who was supposed to fill in those crackbacks on at least 2 of them. So there was some issue there. But in terms of coverage, I think they've been the bright spot, the corners for the Ohio State defense, maybe the only bright spot.
Yeah. Regarding the linebackers, what linebackers are Coach Al Washington recruiting? Well, he's got Powers and Hicks, and he had McCullough, the son of the Indiana assistant coach, who's also a top 50, top 100 guy. He had 3 top 100 linebackers committed. And I think some of that, at least some of that's got to be due to Al Washington. He seems like a real charismatic type guy. The jury is out on how good of a linebacker coach the guy is, because the product they're putting on the field is about as bad as it could possibly be right now. And, they're trying. I mean, they're trying to squeeze that. It's like you're cleaning off your table with that washcloth. And you're trying to squeeze that last bit of water out of it. And they're trying to squeeze whatever playmaking they can out of these guys, but nobody's making any plays. There's no tackles for loss. You just don't see, Ohio State's had great linebacker play, for time and memoriam, back to Ike Kelly in the 60s and Randy Gradishar. There just isn't anybody like that on this roster. And not even all Big Ten, maybe not even all Big Ten honorable mention right now. So, it's rough. It's rough. The material that they're putting on the field, it's, when you move Steel Chambers from running back to linebacker and he gets in there and makes a couple plays that nobody else who's been training to play linebacker at Ohio State for 3 or 4 years are making, that's a pretty bad sign, in my opinion. So, we can talk about Al Washington all we want, but I think the material he's left to put on the field is less than desirable, it seems to me.
Folks, this is amazing Ohio State football content here every week, especially when I keep my mouth shut. These three are phenomenal. You got Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop. Steve is the odd man out from Bucknuts 247 Sports. Kevin, we'll start with you in regards to what you got available.
Yeah, I just finished writing my Tale of the Tape piece that will run tomorrow, where I look at Tulsa. One of those odd ones, because nobody wants to talk about Tulsa. They want to talk about the Oregon game. They want to talk about the defense. So probably going to be my shortest Tale of the Tape of the season, and it still comes in at 2,800 words. I will be recording probably at some point tomorrow my Big Me Kickoff podcast, which is the rebrand of the Buckeye, the other site, Instant Access podcast, and I'll drop that on Friday. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon, and you can find me at BuckeyeScoop.com.
Tony.
Yeah, written about the defense this week, surprisingly. So if you want to check out BuckeyeScoop.com, you can find a couple of pieces there. Ryan Day, mad as heck and not going to take it anymore, and what that means, and who they, where the defense might be going from here. So that's all up on the site right now. Just recorded a podcast, a Buckeye Weekly podcast, me and Tom, or sharing our 12 bold predictions for the Tulsa game, 6 each, as we are kind of in a season-long competition to land the most bold predictions. And as you might suspect, I'm winning right now. Also, you can find me on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. And that's about it for right now, but it's early. It's like Wednesday, right?
It is. What you got, Steve?
Oh, just the usual stuff at bucknuts.com, trying to make sense of what happened last week and trying to spin things forward toward Tulsa. And I did sit down and watched a good portion of the game between Tulsa and Oklahoma State. It was on Fox Sports 1 over the weekend, and I DVR'd it, and just out of curiosity, just to see what it, just to have it in case. And as it turned out, they gave Oklahoma State a very good game, 28-23. It's a rivalry game. It's one of those type games where Tulsa regards it as their Super Bowl, every year. So they give Oklahoma State 70 miles away in Stillwater their best every game. And Oklahoma State looks at it and says, okay, who can we use in this game to get them tuned up to go play Iowa State, Oklahoma, and Texas? And that's kind of how it played out. Tulsa led 14-7, I think, at halftime, had a fourth quarter lead as well before sanity prevailed, and Oklahoma State made a couple plays. They had a kickoff return for a touchdown in the fourth quarter to finally take the lead for good after Tulsa had kicked a field goal. And Tulsa took the field goal to go ahead 17-14 at the Oklahoma State 3-yard line. It's kind of like, what do we do here on 4th and goal from the 2 or the 3? The game's tied. They probably should have gone for it and tried to punch it in, left them at the 2-yard line, because they kicked the field goal and then kick off, and Oklahoma State returns it 90-some yards for the go-ahead touchdown. So darned if you do and darned if you don't sometimes. Tulsa, to me, is going to give Ohio State some tests. Their quarterback, he's only in his first year as a starter, but he played a little bit last year. I think his name's Brin, Brin. Davis Brin, I think is his name. They have a good running back who's originally at Texas A&M, Demetric. I want to say Demetric Moore, if that's the right name. I may not have that right, but Tulsa. This is being an American Conference opponent. I didn't take any written notes on this. It's all up here, so names and whatever. If had this been Indiana or Penn State, I would have, meticulously written down names and strategy and all this stuff. But I just kind of had it on in the background, and I noticed that Tulsa did some very nice things against Oklahoma State. So my feeling is they're going to come into Columbus, probably score on the level of 15 to 20 points, and Ohio State will probably score on the order of 40 to 50 points. And these teams played, 5 years ago, and OSU won 48-3. And in a really bad omen, that game was delayed about 90 minutes midway through because of a thunderstorm. And there is a 40% chance of rain here in Columbus on Saturday, the last time I checked. So that's not a very good omen.
Were there not 2 pick sixes in that game by the Buckeyes?
That sounds right.
Marshawn Lattimore and Malik Hooker.
That sounds right.
Davis Brin, well done, Steve.
Thank you.
62% passer, no TDs,
the other-
2 picks. Demetric Prince.
Prince, not Price.
Demetric Prince.
The other kid had 150 yards against Cal Davis, and he was shut down largely against Oklahoma State. I think he had like 20 carries for 50 yards or something on that realm. And again, they lose to Cal Davis in the first game, a 1AA team. But the issue in that game was 2 of their starting linebackers did not play for violation of team rules, I believe, in that game. And one of their top defensive backs will not play the first half this week. He had targeting, I think his last name is Ray, R-A-Y, Kendarian Ray or something to that effect, will not play this in the first half this week because of targeting against Oklahoma State. So they were without those 2 guys when they lost to Cal Davis. And the only reason I bring up Cal Davis is because that's Dan Hawkins, and my buddy Dave Biddle loves to do his rant, where he got the letter when he was at Colorado, got a letter from a parent. Kids are a little bummed. They only get 2 weeks off this summer instead of 3 weeks off, and it's Division I football. It's the Big 12 conference, and it wasn't for very long for Dan Hawkins. So there you go.
That's right. Well done, Steve. Kadarin Ray, leading tackler for Tulsa.
I don't even write this stuff down, and I've got it all committed to memory. It's up here. I just have to jog the memory,
Folks, the analysis we get here, the leading tackler for Tulsa, we bring that to you. All right, the Super Chat's on, by the way. Or Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just leave an Ohio State notation right there. Mark Rogers TV, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. We've talked for almost our entire time. I don't even know where that accent came from. But I think there's another side of the football. We talked all defense. So I'll just throw this out. 612 yards of total offense seems to make everyone believe everything's fine. They're just needing to push it to the end zone. But 3 missed conversions on 4th down, 2 for 5 on 4th down. I just counted up the drive chart. 9 empty drives, 4 touchdowns, 9 empty. The last play or the last drive, of course, was a hopeless situation. Mismanaged at the end of the first half, I thought, because they made a big play. They had 34 seconds to start the drive. It was tough field position, but they made a big play, put themselves in position, Tony, to do more with that drive. So while the offense can't necessarily be taken off the hook, it was productive, if not efficient.
Yeah, and as Ryan Day kept repeating, the offense put 600 yards of total offense on the board. The offense isn't the issue, but also acknowledge that the offense needs to finish drives. They need to pick up those first downs. They shouldn't be relying so much on C.J. Stroud. The running game needs to get better. The offensive line needs to block better. The running backs need to play better. But anytime another quarterback was mentioned, like somebody asked, did you think about maybe putting Kyle McCord in there at any point. And as that question was being asked, you could see Ryan Day's eyebrows go up, and then he just closed his eyes for a second before he answered, like, no, CJ's doing fine. And, so I think everybody's searching for answers. And yes, you want everything to be perfect. You put up 600 yards of total offense, you should be able to win. You put up 28 points in a given week, you should be able to win. So, I mean, there are things they can do better on offense, but that means, okay, now you've scored 42 points and 700 yards, but did you win?
Right.
Kevin,
I mean, if you take the one long Mayan Williams touchdown off the board, that 71-yarder or whatever, Ohio State is averaging 126 yards a game on the ground. That's just unacceptable for Ohio State, a team that has a DNA in being a running team. So, while the offense seems to be doing well, I mean, 7 touchdowns against a couple of picks, and those picks were kind of one was a tip and one was, under duress, for CJ Stroud. The passing game is there, but where is the run game falling apart? Is it falling apart because the backs aren't hitting the holes or the holes not there? I mean, offensive line is one of those positions that's just kind of the most difficult to be able to judge just from the television broadcast. But, I'm curious as to where the breakdown is in terms of the running game. Certainly they didn't really attempt a lot of runs in the Oregon game with whatever it was, 54 pass attempts. So there's still room for improvement.
Yeah, I have some bullet points on offense. First of all, Stroud threw for 484 yards. He completed 65% of his passes. The 484 is the second most in a single game in OSU history. Haskins threw for 499 against Northwestern in the Big Ten championship game. And Haskins had several 400-yard games that year that he had as the starter. So I think it was a little out of whack, obviously. Could Stroud have done a little bit more throwing the football? Perhaps. He had several passes dropped. He had the deep ball to Chris Olave that kind of went off of his hands and was not tipped. It didn't appear by the defender. I didn't feel. So his interception was basically the same as a punt. It was 3rd and 18. And, they lost possession because of it. But they probably, unless they had gotten 9 or 10 yards on the first play and then 9 or 10 yards on 4th down, probably weren't going to convert that one anyway. So, and he was under immediate duress on that play as well, rolling to his right. And sometimes his footwork betrays him a little bit. The ball kind of sails on him a little bit. But again, I think that's a coachable, teachable thing that he can work through. And I think he'll get better with accuracy as he goes along. If you put this game, really in his category that he was part of the problem, I don't think that you're really thinking things all the way through. He's part of the situation that you have to work around him to overcome his lack of experience. It's only his second start, only the second game he's ever really played. And he, in my opinion, crushed it. I mean, for the large part. The biggest problem with the offense is the fact that there is no threat of the quarterback run. And within the set that they are trying to come off as this zone read RPO team, him not being of an option to run the football, kind of like it was with Haskins, people can sit on your running back and hit your running back all day. And if he's not going to keep the ball, and he only ran the ball 3 times, and I don't even know if any of them were called runs. He was sacked 2 other times that counted as runs. So he had 5 carries. Only 3 times did he pick up positive yards. I asked Coach Day about that, and he said, well, maybe we'll get into more read as we go along. And perhaps some of that had to do with the injury, it seems, to his shoulder that happened in the Minnesota game. Maybe he was protecting himself. Maybe they didn't want him to get hit and leave the game. And to me, without the hint of the quarterback run, that would be huge. Coach Day said, he did convert the 1, but then they had the holding penalty on Thayer Munford, which, Thayer did grab the guy's jersey. It was at the point of attack, so I can understand why a Pac-12 official, which brings up an interesting point. Tulsa, Oklahoma State, the game that I watched, was a one-off. It's a guarantee game at Tulsa or at Oklahoma State. They're paying them to come in, but they had ACC officials, a neutral crew. Why is this game, Ohio State, Oregon, a one-off, essentially a guarantee game, but kind of a guarantee game on steroids, $3 million payout, why do you give them $3 million and also use their officials? They should have ACC officials or SEC officials or Big 12 officials or MAC officials or anybody other than Pac-12 or possibly Big 10 doing that game. So that's an aside. And I don't want to put the game on the officials, but no targeting on the Olave call where it appeared he got speared in the back. That's not targeting anymore. I don't know. But all the way around the bend on the offense, I think that quarterback run's got to be a part of this thing, or you're going to have more games like that. And offensive line, what I was told on the 4th and 2 was they needed to call timeout because Oregon had that thing completely locked up just by the formation that they lined up in, that they weren't going to allow that play to go for anything. And that needed to be recognized and called timeout and get into another play. And my last thing on the offense is you go to all that trouble, and that 62 yards that they got at the end of the first half goes on your card as production, but it got you 0 points. And one reason it got you 0 points was you took a snap at the 30-yard line with 1 second left and didn't throw the ball in the end zone. Threw the ball underneath, I think, to Henderson. And unless he started lateraling it everywhere, it wasn't going to go for 6. So that's one where, again, the kid's inexperienced. He knew enough to get the team up to the line of scrimmage to take the snap when they blew the whistle, but then he didn't throw the ball in the end zone. So that's a missed opportunity because maybe you get a pass interference and you get a first down, and at least you get, maybe you can kick a field goal for 3 or have another shot at it. So my bullet points on the offense.
I noticed that for as much as I like Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson, it was pretty impressive to watch Oregon's linebackers. As soon as they made contact, they dropped them on the spot most of the time. They wrapped them up and dropped them right there. The rushing yardage seemed to come from the offensive line opening holes. That was my assessment from just watching once. I didn't watch any replays.
Smart man.
Well,
you know what's interesting is Big Ten Network. I don't know if they ever replayed it since the Big Ten team got beat. They may have had it slotted for repeats and may have filled it out with other games that Big Ten teams won. And I bought Pac-12 Network just so I could scout Oregon, and the game with Fresno was on Pac-12 Network. And as I scoured through their schedule, it's not scheduled for a replay on there because they thought it was going to be a loss for their team. So trying to find a replay of this game, good luck. It's probably on YouTube. I mean, somebody out there pirates the game and puts the whole thing up there till Fox or ESPN tell them to yank it down. But trying to find a replay of it. Maybe Fox Sports 1's playing it at 2 a.m. or something. But it's kind of hard to find.
all right, guys. Anything else here? We got Tulsa up front. I saw a point spread at 25 in the live chat. You can also catch these 3 guys and their picks on Patreon with myself. I will brag up a 17-7 week against the spread. And in the weeks that I'm silent, you'll know how that week went. But for right now, 17-7 against the spread, at least last week, 29-19. I think I'm around 62% against the spread. I'll take that for the rest of the season. But you get Steve, Kevin, and Tony. They've been kind enough to provide their predictions as well. A little 12-pack each and every week at the toughest games to predict, the ones that are relevant with a really good week of college football slated again this week. Will, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Thanks for doing your part to make Buckeye football better. Keep them honest, fellas. You guys are making Buckeye football better this week, working on a defensive scheme for Kerry Combs, I hear. Okay.
Iron sharpens iron.
We were over there doing film session last night till 2 a.m. trying to get to the bottom. We're going to get to the bottom of this thing one way or the other. So, it's basically they've asked for all hands on deck, and any interested parties, go in and watch the film and share your 2 cents. And, it can only get better. I mean, have there been bad losses in the past? Yeah, but they did come back from Virginia Tech, and they only dropped with Virginia Tech. They dropped into the 20s With this, they only dropped a 9 in the AP and 11 in the coaches. I had them 7 on my ballot in the football writers thing that I do, but I can understand. I have them still ahead of Cincinnati on mine. I think that most of the polls have Cincinnati ahead of them, which is an interesting dichotomy. When was the last time that ever happened? And that could be the first time that's ever happened, that Cincinnati has had a place in the polls ahead of Ohio State. I know Brian Kelly had an unbeaten team there back in 2010, maybe.
09?
Yeah,
Yeah, they
09.
played Tebow in the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah,
that was
so
ugly.
they're probably ranked ahead of Ohio State then, but otherwise, it's great times. And if they do follow through and UC joins the Big 12, I think that can only be a good thing for the state of Ohio and helping kids in the state of Ohio play college football at the highest level. Although remains to be seen whether the other 4 leagues are still going to consider Big 12 to be Power 5 at that point. But guess we'll cross all those bridges when we come to it.
Kevin, get out of here. Thank you so much for your contribution. As always, everybody follow Kevin, Buckeye Scoop. I had one other thing to say. I thought I did, maybe not. I don't know that anybody wants to check out my top 25 as an Ohio State fan. But if you do and you want to rant and rail on me, yeah, my top 25 that actually makes sense is out there.
Kevin made a comment that the Big Ten's not very good, and I don't want to keep Tony any longer. But
I was going to jump on that as well, Steve. Go ahead.
This is what I'll say to that is, Ohio State lost to Oregon, and that one hurts because that was the marquee non-conference game, I think, for the conference and will help shape many opinions. But there are still opportunities out there for the Big Ten to steal some cachet, and this weekend is a perfect example of that. I mean, this noon shift on Saturday, I was originally going to do a tailgate party, but everybody in my family has found reasons to get out of it. My daughters are driving to Washington, D.C. to pay $500 to go to a Harry Styles concert at the Bullets or the Wizards Arena downtown. And so I was going to have to set up 3 televisions because you've got Michigan State's playing Miami, Indiana is playing Cincinnati, and there's one more big game that's escaping me. In the first shift, Michigan's playing, I think, another MAC school.
Northern Illinois.
Yeah, Northern Illinois.
There's Oklahoma, Nebraska.
Oh, yeah, Oklahoma, Nebraska, obviously. I don't think anybody gives Nebraska much of a shot at that on the road, but Oklahoma has proved they can't really stop anybody. So, if Adrian Martinez gets it rolling, which he did last week, in the game that they played, a lesser opponent, he had over 200 throwing and 100 rushing. Maybe they put a scare in Oklahoma. I don't know. Penn State hosting Auburn. Iowa's already beaten Iowa State. That's the other marquee non-conference game of the year for the Big Ten, a top 10 matchup. So, to my way of thinking, there's still a lot of meat on this bone. Purdue is playing Notre Dame on Saturday at 2:30. Notre Dame hasn't exactly looked like gangbusters, whereas Purdue's playing, and their quarterback Plummer's playing pretty good football. Purdue could steal one, maybe. Wisconsin plays Notre Dame, I think, next week, and so there's a lot of opportunity out there for the Big Ten to maintain some credibility if they're able to win, some of these games and really just not get blown out. That would be as good as anything in some of these situations. But, Michigan State, I think, has got to be on a little bit of a watch down at Miami because Miami hasn't played very well, obviously lost to Alabama and barely got by Appalachian State. And Michigan State's kind of an unknown quantity. They could go down there and Miami could put it together and beat them by 20. And you don't want to see that, obviously. But, I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. But I challenge that assessment a little bit. I think Big Ten's kind of holding their own. And we'll see how this weekend, next weekend play out.
If you've got a minute, Tony, how good's the Big Ten?
I think it's fine right now. They've had some good weeks. Until Michigan collapses, let's assume they're going to be okay, but that eventually that's going to happen in some form or fashion. And is that 4 losses? Is that 6 losses? Penn State's defense is looking good. their offense is going to hold them back. Wisconsin, I've been disappointed in with their offense. They're still looking. I mean, Chiz Malusi, the running back from Clemson, is doing well. I think I expected more from their entire offense. Graham Mertz is not looking good, does not have much help outside of Jake Ferguson and Danny Davis. And I don't know how much help Danny Davis has really been. But like Iowa has been impressive in the fact that they're not really impressive, but like the offense is very average. Defense is very good. And they just smother you and they beat you up. They turn you over and they capitalize. They score on defense. Ball. Yeah, and it's one of those things where you could see Ohio State having some difficulty with them because Iowa knows exactly what they're doing and they do it. And sometimes when the roster is exactly right, they do it very well, and they could be one game away from playing for playing in the playoffs like they were in 2015.
Yeah, Iowa beat Iowa State handily, and they only had 260 yards total offense, something like that.
I don't think they had that much.
Yeah, it may not be that much. And Iowa State, I think, had 4 turnovers, I believe, in that game. Wasn't I don't know, was there a pick six involved in that game? Yeah.
Yes.
So and
they had 2 the week before.
So they are a fabulous defensive team. I had them number 4 on my ballot, and I think they're number 5 or 6 in the polls. And I have them ahead of Clemson just because Clemson, to me, until they do it against I look at it that Iowa has actually accomplished something, whereas Clemson honestly has not accomplished anything. And on paper, potential, they have 20 more 5-stars than Iowa, but they're going to have to go out and show me. They're going to have to go out and prove it. And I think that they're playing Georgia Tech this week. Clemson.
Yes.
Does that sound right? And I don't think Georgia Tech lost their first game to a lesser opponent, I believe.
Northern Illinois.
Yes. I saw that as I was kind of scouting Northern Illinois for that matchup with Michigan. Georgia Tech is not a top-line ACC team, but Clemson needs to go and take care of business. I mean, I need to see that this week. So, and I'm not saying blow them out by 40 points, but, show me that you're going to put 35, 40 points on the board against a good team. Show, their defense is awesome. I don't think we have any qualm about that. What they did to Georgia was just as impressive almost as what Georgia did to Clemson. So, they got one unit pretty good. So, all these teams have one unit pretty good. Alabama has 2 units pretty good. That's what separates them.
Well, I rank the wins and the losses. I don't rank the teams. So I've got Iowa number 1.
Well,
I think they have collectively the 2 best wins in the country.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about what Indiana still has the potential to win 8 or 9 games. This is an important game for them this week. They absolutely have to hold serve at home against Cincinnati. I don't know what the point spread line is on that. Maybe Cincinnati -3.
Yes.
Wow, that was a heck of a guess because I hadn't even looked.
It is 3.5 is what I put down.
Ordinarily, the home field is worth 3 points. So if they played on a neutral field, they would think Cincinnati's a 6 or 7 point favorite over Indiana. And I'm not sure if Penix extricates his head from what happened in the first week, which it appeared they did last week against Idaho, which Idaho is an FCS team, but we'll see. Maybe that has the potential to be an amazing game. It really does. And Cincinnati's playing for, it's not a conference championship, but it's for so much more. Fickle, debukes the idea. He's looking at USC, says it's great when you get those phone calls in December and January, but not so good in September because you got work to do. So, I think he's happy at UC.
You're right, Steve. It's an amazing lineup of games for the Big Ten this week. 6 of them against the Power 5, including Cincinnati as well. And the Big Ten, I'm going to produce a video here. I've done all sorts of calculations. 16-3 non-conference, 5-2 against the Power 5.
That's good. Good start.
Yep. I especially like, not that I'm going to pick them to win, but especially I'm considering it, Michigan State at Miami, Purdue, Notre Dame. I think they've got real shots to win those games.
I think they give both those teams a tough go because Notre Dame defensively hasn't shown they can do anything. I mean, they have been a complete 0. I'd say their defense is about a 2, and Ohio State's is about a 1.5 right now. And they got to pick it up, no question about it.
All right, guys, we appreciate it so much. Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts. You guys are amazing. Have a great week. Enjoy the game on Saturday.
All right,
Thanks.
take care.
Talk to you later.